That same day, James and I went to another clinic. And at this clinic, I heard my first bit of abortion counseling. And I would hear similar counseling across the country in later projects when I'd go across the country with teams of other brave young people to do this undercover work. But this was the piece of advice that an abortionist, who was the manager of the clinic, told myself and James, totally overlooking the age difference, not caring that this was technically statutory rape, that she had to be concerned and make a report and get help from me as an underage girl. But she went on to give me her advice. She said, and I'm asking, I'm pregnant, what do I do? And she said, you know what? When I was 17, I got pregnant. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, I did, and it was very difficult. And I said, well, what did you do? And she said, well, I kept the baby. And I remember thinking, pro-life counseling at an abortion clinic, she must be undercover too, telling me to keep the baby. This is great. But, I see the character and I was like, you did? Well, did you regret it? And she said, well, if I could do it again, I would do it very differently. If I could do it again, I would not continue the pregnancy. And my son, he's 16 now. If she could do it again, she would go back in time and abort her son, who's now 16 years old. That being my first interaction, my first 2 interactions with Planned Parenthood. You can imagine what that did to James and I as we got in the car and we left the clinic thinking, wow, if this is at the first 2 clinics, what's happening at all of the other clinics? Certainly since those first 2 investigations, Planned Parenthood has begun to catch on. I guess you could say that now I am flattered when I walk into an abortion clinic to see my picture on the wall. Flattered might not be the right word, but this is because, according to Planned Parenthood, I am a known anti-choice extremist. But I think that I am in good company. For as Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his letter from a Birmingham jail, when he was put in jail for doing his controversial activism on the streets in Birmingham throughout this deep South, he wrote in this letter to people that were concerned, some of them church leaders, saying, Martin, you really should change your tactics, Mr. King. You really should do something different because you seem a little extreme. Why don't you just write some letters or something? And Martin Luther King Jr. wrote them a letter, and he said, the world is in dire need of creative extremists. And that is a call for all of us here today, that the world is in dire need of young people especially, who will think creatively, think courageously, and say, how can I address this issue and expose the truth about abortion, about this death all around us, and educate people around me, and spread awareness around me? How can I be willing to seem extreme to some, but really am leading the way into what will become mainstream, what will become the accepted truth across America, that every life is precious? That ultimately is the message of Martin Luther King Jr. A quick story. Martin Luther King Jr. was part of a movement that was inspired in large part by images. And this is the importance of new media, the importance of visual media. Live Action, our organization, focuses on taking actual video footage, going inside the clinic and getting actual video footage. I'm going to be showing some here tonight in just a few minutes. We focus on creating a magazine. There's some at the front that you can pick up later that has images of abortion, images of what abortion does to an unborn child, images of women that have suffered from abortion that just show the depictions of what really happens when an abortion takes place. There's a great precedent for all of this. Back in 1955, when there was lawful discrimination built into legal systems in the Deep South, there was a little boy visiting his uncle named Emmett Till. And he was coming from the northern part of America where there was less discrimination, less racism. And he was visiting his cousins. And Emmett was only 14 years old. When he was visiting his cousins, he was accused, playing outside a convenience store, maybe he was buying a pack of gum. Nonetheless, this young boy was accused of whistling at a white woman. Well, this ugly rumor spread around town, and in the middle of the night, a couple days later, from his uncle's home, 14-year-old Emmett Till was kidnapped by a group of racist white men. And they took little Emmett into the countryside, into an old shed, and they beat him so badly he was beyond recognition. They knocked his nose up into his face, they gouged him an eye, they shot him through the head, and they left his body in a creek bed. Well, when Emmett's mother found out about this, and they recognized the body later on, Emmett was missing, they searched for the body, they found his body, which was so decomposed and beyond recognition, they only recognized him by a ring that had been his father's ring on his finger. And when his mother found this out, she was just full of grief, and she asked for the body of her son. She wanted to give her son a proper burial. Well, the coroner said, okay, Mrs. Till, we can send you, his body for a proper burial, but the government was in on this too. Don't open the coffin. Don't take any pictures. Don't show anyone what he looks like. They didn't want to incite more violence. They said they didn't want to cause more problems. Don't look at Emmett's body. Mrs. Till received the coffin of her son, and she had it opened. And then she decided to do something very controversial. She decided to hold a public funeral and invite photojournalists, to invite the news media, to invite anyone who would want to come, the whole public, to come and see the body of her son, because she decided to leave that casket open. And people said to her, Mrs. Till, this is very controversial. You really shouldn't do this. You might incite more violence. Actually, this is disrespectful to the body of your son. Don't do this, Mrs. Till. But Emmett's mother said, I want the whole world to see what is happening, what has happened to my little Emmett. And likewise, we want the whole world to see what is happening to these unborn children that are hidden inside their mothers, that are hidden behind the sterile walls of abortion clinics, and what is happening to the women, many of whom suffer psychological, emotional, and even physical trauma after these abortions and rarely have their stories told. That's what we are going to do. Go where the injustice takes place, go where the abuse takes place, and pry open those coffins, and show an unwilling public often, but show the public what is really going on. That is our duty with the new media and the great opportunity that we have with the new media. So briefly, I'm going to share with you a couple of our investigative projects that are ongoing right now. We're going to